Once upon a time, in the ancient kingdom of Lydia, there lived a shepherd named Gyges. One day, while tending his sheep, a sudden, powerful storm and earthquake shakes the ground and opens a large chasm in front of him. Curious, Gyges goes down into the opening to explore. Inside, he discovers a large hollow bronze horse containing the body of something more than human wearing a gold ring. He takes the ring and returns to the surface. Later, while in the company of his fellow shepherds, he discovers that if he twists the ring a certain way on his finger, he becomes invisible. No one can see him or detect his presence. He realizes he could do anything without being detected and recognizes the great power this gives him. What now? Will he use his newfound power to do good, to help others? Nope. He sneaks into the palace, seduces the queen, murders the king, and takes his crown. The end. This story comes from Book 2 of Plato's The Republic, written around 375 BC. So why would Plato, one of the greatest philosophers in history, tell this very short story? Plato intended the tale to serve as a thought experiment to consider what he referred to as inner justice. Imagining a scenario where someone has the power to act without consequences focuses us on the tension between intrinsic morality and external constraints. However, the story also raises broader questions about virtue, whether people are genuinely virtuous or simply appear so due to societal expectations. Although the story presents a bleak view of human behavior, Plato believed that living a just life is possible, regardless of external consequences. His ultimate argument is that true justice, and by extension virtue, is an internal state of harmony and is worth pursuing regardless of external circumstances. There are strong similarities between the story of Gyges and another famous work of fiction. In The Lord of the Rings, J.R.R. Tolkien also describes a ring of power that grants its wearer invisibility, but exerts a corrupting influence. Tolkien's early British education emphasized Latin and Greek, so he would have been well familiar with Plato and other classical texts. Tolkien's ring acts as a test of intrinsic morality by exposing whether characters can resist its influence based on their internal strength and values. Despite Frodo's eventual failure at Mount Doom, his earlier choices and willingness to sacrifice for the greater good demonstrate his moral character, showing that intrinsic morality is not about perfection, but about striving to do what is right, despite flaws and temptations. Even Smeagol, who succumbs to the ring and is transformed into Gollum, presents a duality that reflects the struggle between intrinsic morality and corruption. His moments of remorse suggest that the capacity for goodness still exists within him, but his choices are ultimately shaped by forces external. So where does virtue come from? Plato believed it came from the soul. He thought of the soul as having three parts: reason, the part that seeks truth, wisdom, and knowledge; spirit, the source of emotions, courage, and honor; desire, the part that pursues physical pleasures and material needs. If reason, assisted by spirit, can moderate desire to prevent excess and indulgence, then the soul is in balance and inner justice arises. He thought that achieving such a balance requires a knowledge of the eternal, unchanging ideal of good, which is discovered through education, reflection, philosophical inquiry, and a love of wisdom. The concept of virtue, and whether it is intrinsic to human nature or shaped by external forces, has been explored by many philosophers throughout history. Confucius believed it to be intrinsic, but refined through relationships and rituals. Thomas Hobbes thought it emerged from social contracts. Jean-Jacques Rousseau argued that humans are naturally good, but are corrupted by society. David Hume theorized that virtue was a product of human sentiment or emotions. Whichever theory of virtue you may think is accurate, the story of Gyges forces us to consider some uncomfortable truths. His actions might not seem so far removed from how we may behave when we think no one's watching. We might not have magical rings, but we all encounter situations where we feel invisible, or at least unaccountable. Consider the way some people behave online, hiding behind anonymity. The cruel comments, the trolling. These actions reveal something about human nature. But even though we may not articulate it philosophically, we seem to recognize the value of internal virtue. Don't we usually identify with the hero of a story who does what they consider the right thing in the face of overwhelming opposition, even at the risk of their own life? Plato, through his simple story, gives us a great deal to think about. Thank you for watching. Try to live your life with virtue. Oh, and liking and subscribing to this channel is a good start.